identified that the book of Deuteronomy can be divided into certain parts. We've seen that. The section that we're dealing with begins in chapter 12 and it ends in chapter 26. And then if you have any subheadings in your Bible, but if you go to chapter 37, does anybody have anything? 27, sorry. Chapter 27. A little subtitle that you might have there. So in my Bible, I have two versions. One says the altar on Mount Ebal, setting up of the altar, and the other one says the third oration, the blessings and the curse. Do you have something similar in your Bible? Have some breakdown? So I think it's clear to say that that section is 14 chapters. Is one part of book of Deuteronomy. If you go to chapter 12, does anybody have a subtitle there? What do you have?
Monuments of idolatry have to be destroyed.
The monuments of idolatry have to be destroyed. Anyone else? My Bible says the book of the covenant in the chapter 12. These are the statutes and judgments which ye shall observe to do in the land which the Lord God of thy fathers giveth thee to possess it all the days ye live upon the earth. Ye shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which ye shall possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains, upon the hills, and under every green tree. And ye shall overthrow their altars, break their pillars, burn their groves with fire, and ye shall hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the names of them out of that place. Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God, but unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation shall ye seek, and thither thou shalt come. And thither ye shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, and your tithes and heave offerings of your hand, and your vows and your freewill offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and your flocks. What's the introduction of this section teaching us? Anybody? Someone else? My sister?
I can see it's tied to the commandment number 2.
It's tied to commandments number 2.
Yeah, they are not to worship idols, and they are to destroy any graven image that will tempt them to worship of idols.
So they're not allowed to worship any image, and they're to destroy what they're to destroy?
Graven images that
They're to destroy the graven images. Mr. Dorcas? Oh, sorry, you're not sure which verse we're in. We're in chapter 12. And we read, I think, about the first 4 or 5, maybe 6 verses. Give you a chance to read. Mr. Jackie? What things can we notice? So what we notice is that the land that they're about to take control of is a land filled with idolaters, and they're required to destroy all of their all their idols, everything that's associated with their forms of worship. Anyone else? Mr. Joy?
They're just instructions on how they're going to do their worship when they get to Canaan. They're supposed to destroy the idolatrous places and erect their own places of worship.
Sister Schneider?
It's just a form of,
Sorry?
it's explaining how you should carry out your worship.
Anyone else want to make a comment?
I can see compare and contrast.
Sorry?
Compare and contrast. So in verse 2, it explains what will happen in the places where they worship their idols. In verse 5, it begins with the word, but unto the place which ye shall worship the Lord. So the place where they worship their idols is being compared and contrasted to the place where they shall worship their God.
Can you repeat that last bit, sorry?
He said, if you go to verse 2, it speaks about the places where they are worshiping their gods from. Verse 5 speaks about the place where they shall worship their God from. So there is comparison and contrast between those two places. And what is to happen to each.
Last bit?
And what is to happen to each of them.
So, Brother Rogers is comparing verse 2 with verse 5 and how you're supposed to relate to these two gods. So I just want to turn our attention to verse 4. So if we're going to compare how we deal with both of these two types of God, these two styles of worship, the true and the false, verse 2, ye shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which ye shall possess serve their gods. Verse 4, ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God. So it tells you what to do with false worship and then what to do with true worship. You're to destroy one, but you're not allowed to destroy the second. You're forbidden to destroy the second. Why would he say that? I mean, isn't it obvious that you wouldn't destroy the worship of God? Why would he make that point? Any thoughts?
Or think to be a warning that you are not destroying idols and you are to worship the true God. So it's like a warning that you should not destroy your true God and go back to the idols.
So, what's the difference between... There's a number of differences that are marked here, but what's one of the ones that stand out for you between that false system and this true system? When you look at verses 2 and 3, 4 and 5. Have you had a chance to look at the verses? Yeah. What stands out for you when you compare verses 2 and 3 and then 4 and 5? The suggestion is that we can compare the two forms of worship, the two gods. We've seen that you're to destroy one, and then verse 4 says, but you will not destroy the other. So we've seen that there's a difference between how you're supposed to relate to the two. Is there anything else for you that stands out?
Well, I think the verses from verse 3,
Verse 2 and 3, when you look at them.
God was telling them to destroy the others and all the name of the God, the land they're going to possess, destroy all those things, then they survey.
To destroy the idols and all the names of their gods.
verse 6, they are going to build the altar and they will bring the burnt offering.
So in verse 6, they're going to set up an altar and do what?
In verse 4, when it says you shall not do to the Lord your God, it's when they are going to separate the second altar, they should not destroy it.
So when they set up an altar, they should not destroy it.
So when I try to understand is that they destroy the God of the other nation and they separate the altar of their God, because it's that God was showing them the true God to worship than the idols. So they should separate the altar and the worship because it's the true God than the idols. Or the Bible said when you are going to build a second idol, you should not destroy it like the others. Like the others, no God. That's what I can understand.
Okay, brother?
As I'm seeing in 2 and 3, the idols are the places for their worship is almost everywhere. On the mountains, on every hill, and under every green tree.
So in verses 2 and 3, you see a plurality.
Yeah.
It speaks about many places. The last part of verse 2, mountains, hills, and the last part, every tree.
Yeah. So it's like their places of worship is almost scattered everywhere. But if you are to come to 5, God is going to say that He's going to place it in some certain places. So if He's going to place it,
Verse 5 says what?
He's going to choose. Okay, God is going to choose where He's going to place His altars. So
Altars. No, let him do it. Let him do it.
So God
Make
is
your
going
point again.
okay. So God is going to choose where His habitation will be. So then you have to seek that place. So if you think that you know the story, you cannot destroy what you don't know. So you first have to acknowledge where God is going to place where they're going to worship Him, so that you can go there. But for the idols are almost everywhere, so you should be specific. Specify which one is for God and which one is not for God. So you cannot destroy the one for God because you know where it is. It is not everywhere.
So one of the big differences is that this 4 system has places of worship everywhere, and the new system, the true system, will only have one place. So it's many and one. So there's a big difference. And that one place, where will that be? Where will that one place be? God will decide, not you. So God will decide that place, you won't decide that place. Which infers that all the other places are... men have chosen those other places. So we can see that difference. And there's one more. At least one more, there's many more. There's one more that I want us to pick up. Verse 2. Still in verse 2. We said many places, one place. We infer men chose, God chooses. So we've seen that. And there's this idea, why would they say, don't destroy what God is going to set up? How could that happen? How could people destroy what God is setting up? Could you imagine that? Could you imagine all of us saying, oh, we want to go to that place, destroy that church because we don't like it. Let's go and destroy another place. Could we do that? Because that's what it's saying, isn't it? So why the warning?
I think the warnings are have to come for God astray. People has gone back, apostatized.
If we go back and apostatize,
Yes. And then you worship the idol. So you cannot turn to destroy the altar of God.
okay, so my brother thinks it's about turning away from God and going back to idolatry. Any other thoughts? What's the important word in verse 2? Or 1? So this one's difficult because perhaps we've all got our different thoughts, and I've just got a thought now. The first one that that stood out for me is when Brother Roger said compare and contrast. When I took that perspective, is that it's many places and one place. That was one point. Men choose, God chooses. That was another point. There's one more for me that's standing out. So I can see it in verse 2. What word? What's the venture? There aren't that. We could all guess, I guess. There aren't that many words in there. What am I thinking?
Upon the high mountains.
So we did the mountains already. My brother said upon the high mountains. We've already done the mountains. Many mountains, one place.
Yeah, many nations. But
Nations.
Yeah, but this one.
Okay, so I was thinking nations. So you tell me, Brother Alex?
Yeah, I'm saying this one will be only Israel.
So we've got many countries, many nations, and therefore one nation. So if you have many nations and one nation, why does he want to make this point about one nation? Why one nation? Why make that point? Don't they all know that they're one nation?
I was not answering that. I was putting another thing which is being contrasted there.
If there's another one, let's do this one then, if you can remember the one that you had.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, come again.
Okay? So, aren't they one nation already?
Yeah, I think because they are the only chosen nation.
Sorry,
Chosen nation.
they're a chosen nation. Aren't they one nation? That's my question. Yes or no?
I think it's because they have one God and each nation has their own gods. For example, in verse 2, in verse 3, no, verse 2, they say each nation has its own God. But Israel, as a nation, has its own God.
Okay?
Yes, I know. The reason as to why we say this is one nation is because God was specific only to Israel by saying that in all your tribes. So these are not tribes of the world, but the tribes of Israel. I think compared to verse 2, where there are so many nations. So God is specific here.
Okay,
But
so
the tribes of Israel.
I want to suggest that Israel is not one nation. So let's go to the book of Judges. Chapter 17. Judges chapter 17. As you're turning to Judges chapter 17, is the United States of America one nation? Yes or no? Is the USSR, doesn't exist now, they've got their own version of it now, was the USSR one nation?
No.
Why do we say that's not one nation and we say the United States is one nation? Because what's the difference between them? I'll ask a different question. Is Europe one nation?
No.
Okay, so I'll ask another question. The Senate in the United States, that country, that big country, where is the Senate located? Do we know what the Senate is? You've got Congress, you've got the lower house and the upper house. Where is the Senate? In Washington, D.C. Okay, so that's obviously the wrong answer, because I was asking, where is the Senate for Philadelphia? Or Arkansas? Doesn't Arkansas have a Senate? Where's the Supreme Court? Depends what reference we're talking about. The United States, we're so used to thinking of it as a single country, but it's not. Each state has its own system of governance which models the federal system. That's why there's this tension in the United States. Is there a tension in the United States? Yes? So, people have done many presentations of late on the Constitution, whether it's a good document or a bad document, inspired by God or not inspired by God, and people have their different perspectives. Hold that thought. What did we read yesterday in the Q&A? What did I read to you in the Q&A? Who were the people that I spoke about? Remember? But if you can't remember who I was speaking about, you remember the gist of what I mentioned. It's a nice little, I thought it was a nice little reading. Who can remember? Not the place. What was the story? My brother, what was the story?
I cannot remember exactly the wording, but it's of the two people.
Two people. What's the problem? One person is not their job. At the back. Sorry?
The Archbishop of Canterbury.
Okay, yeah, not the people. I'm not asking who the people are.
One person speaks real things as imaginary, and another one speaks imaginary things as real.
So one person's interesting and one person's boring. That's one point. One is interesting, one is boring. And the interesting person, the way he speaks, is with force. So he tells a lie and turns it into the truth, and the other one turns the truth into a lie. So another way to express it, one person has a perspective and they say it so well, everybody believes this is the gospel truth. And the other one has a perspective and says it in such a horrible way, no one is even listening. So, the problem is in our movement, we have teachers who have got very strong voices. And when they give a perspective, if they say it strongly enough, like Mr. Betterton, what happens? People believe. And then the boring speakers, people say, that can't be the right perspective. So what can happen is, if you give a perspective on a certain subject, and you're a good orator, an actor, then people say, that must be the correct version. So, you'll probably have heard of presentations where people say, the Constitution of the United States is a document that has integrity, perfect if you like, inspired by God, is the equivalent of the Bible. Maybe you've heard things like that. Yeah. And you have other people who say it's not that good a document. So it depends on one's perspective, it depends on the study that you're doing, it depends on which perspective you want to have. So I've done presentations where I'm going to say that the Constitution is not a very good document. I'm going to say it in the context of a compromised document. Why would I say it's a compromised document? If anybody's seen those studies or anybody has their own perspective. Why is it a compromised document? Does anybody have any knowledge of how the United States was formed in respect to these laws and documents that were produced? Nobody. We really should have an understanding of, just at least a surface understanding of what was going on. So, the Constitution, oh, go ahead.
I think the men who come to put it together, they have different views, and many of them are conflicting, so at some point they have to compromise.
So, let me repeat that. The people who come together, they have different views of what is right and what is wrong when it comes to this issue of governance. And when they come together, they produce a document that is a compromised document. Not everybody agrees with what everything is written in that document. It's a compromise. When people come together, that they're all willing to say, I'll sign that document, even though they don't all fully agree on everything. But they say, I can live with that.
Their main goal is to unite, have a nation, united nation, and not necessarily to deal with the different points that disunite them.
So there are points that do not unite them. Two different states have a different perspective. But what they want to do is produce a nation. That's what, and they did it so well. All of you say the United States is one nation, but when I go to the USSR or the EU, you all say they did such a bad job that they're not a singular nation. It doesn't have the feel to it. Yeah? So, anything else you want to say? Okay, so it's a document that's produced by people with different perspectives.
Also, when they were coming up with that document, it was kind of plagiarist. They were bringing from thoughts of other people from Europe, and they come and...
Is that bad? To plagiarize?
No, it's not bad, but that the people, what is was governing, these are the people from different places. And
why do you make the point of plagiarism? What was the point you're making about plagiarism?
I'm saying not, like for example, it was like copy-pasting.
Yeah, what's the problem with that?
The problem is that this constitution was governing a certain group of people, and now this United Nations, people from different, and it has to govern all those people.
Why can't you cut and paste things? Does that make it less divine?
Not it was bad to do that, but it was considered that was governing a certain group of people or an idea of a person, but now that it becomes something that will govern many people.
Is that good?
For me, it is something that will bring problem later on, because there are different people and issues that has to be addressed.
Okay. Anyone else? When that document's being put together, you have people who disagree with it. And why are they disagreeing? What is their perspective? Take care of what?
Take care of what you're doing.
Someone else, right? What do they want to take care of?
Rights of the individual states.
You want to take care of yourself. They're there to represent their house, their people, and all they're interested in is taking care of their rights. They don't care about anyone else who lives 1,000 miles away. They care about their own people. So when they go and they're forced to relinquish some of their claims, some of their, what they think is their legitimate rights, this is why this document becomes a compromised document. They don't actually agree with everything that's been written. So when you want to force someone to do something they don't want to do, how do you do that? What techniques can you use? I want to get you to do something and you don't want to do it. What techniques can you use? Blackmail? Any others? Force. You can use force. You can use blackmail. One more. Persuasion.
Compromise.
Why would you compromise?
So you get, for example, you're disagreeing on two ideas. Let me give an example.
So if we want to compromise, but I'm going to say, well, why should I compromise?
It's because
I'm going to say something after. Why should I compromise? What's in it for me? What are you going to give me?
I want to give, there's something I'll give you that you want, and there's something that I'll get in return.
So I don't care what you're going to get. I don't care what I'm going to get. So what do you have to do? Bribery. So What did we talk about? Force, blackmail, persuasion, and bribery. Sometimes we could persuade you at this school to be good. It lasts about 5 minutes. Other times we have to do some compromise. Other times we use force. Force is a difficult one because we don't really have big enough sticks. So we're using all those techniques here in this school, which when you think about it is quite sad, isn't it? That we have to use all those techniques. What's it telling us? We have to go to a kitchen, we have to throw people out. What's that telling you? That we're not what? Verse 2, what's our word? Tells you we're not one nation. We're not one people. The fact that we have to apply force to a small group of 60 odd people, we can't even control this group amongst ourselves. So that if you have to apply force in a group like this, you know we're not one nation. So, coming back to our story. So, you've got different techniques to get people to do what you want. So, one of the things that they did, when they produced a constitution, he said, okay, we'll produce this document. And this document is at what level? Is it at the state level, the individual level, or the united level, which we call the federal level? Is it the federal level or the state level, the constitution? It's at a federal level. So we should know the constitution is a federal document. We should know that it was a document that has compromises in it. It was produced by people who had different views of how to move forward. People who were protecting their own country. And yet, they all saw the need of coming together, joining together, being in unity. So different countries coming into unity. We don't like to use this concept of country when it comes to the United States. And I'm saying because we're brainwashed into this concept. But when it comes to Europe, we always say, oh, it's not really united anything. It's just different countries using each other or doing evil. This is why Brexit has happened. Because the European Union were never successful in the way the Americans were. For whatever reason, they've just not been successful. And they've been doing it for a long time. It's not just a few years. They've been going for quite a long time. So they've had enough time to get things sorted out. So coming back to America, the compromise they're going to do is what? Why will they release their freedoms, if I can say it that way? Why will they give up their freedoms? What will they get in return? They get something in return. What is that? Again, this is another point that we should all know when we start considering this issue. So, it's a compromised document. It's a compromised federal document that's produced by people with different views. And for them to sign up to this document, they want something in return. So they're going to be bribed. We can say it that way. What do they get in return? What are they worried about? What are they worried about? They say, sign up to this scheme. And what would people be worried about to sign up to it? Takes away their rights. They're worried about their rights. They say, we have a certain way of living in our country, and if we agree with this document, we don't have all the rights that we want. Because the other country, they want to run things a different way. So they can agree on 80% of the things, common, but this person says 20% of the things that I believe in, I'm going to lose. And the other one says, well, I'm going to lose my 20% because they don't merge. So people are worried that they're going to lose their rights. So what are they going to have to do? You're going to have to be bribed. So we say, lose your rights for this, but we'll give you something in return. These are all the same issues that we're facing here in our school, by the way. Or if you want to say in South Sudan or Uganda or Kenya, same issue. To sign up to this federalist perspective means giving up some of your rights. So, they're going to give up some of their rights. What do they get in return? Who knows? Take the word rights.
Strength.
Strength?
Strength.
Strength, not strength. Yeah, they will get strength, yes. The important word is rights. They get a law, which is called a Bill of Rights. So we should have all heard of the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights is for whom? Exactly, who's the Bill of Rights for? Sorry? Not the individual what? The individual states. They say, if we sign up to this federal document, we want some of our rights protected. So they produce this law of rights. It's called the Bill of Rights. That Bill of Rights was not an afterthought, because the two documents were published years apart. The Bill of Rights was already there in the minds of those people when the Constitution was written. They cut a deal, if we say it that way. We'll give you this if you give us something in return. And what they were given in return was called the Bill of Rights. Does everybody know what bill means? My sister, what does bill mean? Yeah, oh, the one, yeah. Yeah, bill. Bill equals?
Set of rules.
Bill equals, just one word. My sister with the glasses? Bill equals? Rules. Don't the word rules. My sister? Bill equals? I said it 3 times already, so just making sure everybody got what I said. That's what I'm asking. My sister? Bill equals? Sorry? Law. Bill equals law. It's a law. That's all it means. Bill means law. A law of rights. We could put in parentheses, a law of rights for the states. So that this federal system cannot do what? Overpower or destroy the state. Are we okay with that? So, come back to my question. We're in Judges 17 verse 6. Is Israel a nation? Everybody said yes. Why did I say no? What is Israel? Just thinking about what in our discussion that we've just had. Sorry? Individuals? So confederacy. What word did we use? What word did we use? What is Israel? No, not from the Bible, the word that we used in our discussion. Federal. Do you remember? Israel is a federal system. Confederacy. Confederacy, federal. You have the federal in confederacy. And it's comprised of what? 12 tribes. So it's a federal system comprised of individual tribes or individual countries. So Joshua, when he goes there, what's he going to do to the country? He's going to cut it up, isn't he? He's going to get that land and he's going to cut it up and he says, this is your country and this is your country. We tend not to think about it that way because we just think, oh, it's this beautiful story of one nation and they all love each other. Judges 17:6. In those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Now the way we look at that, we can say it's anarchy. Every person, every individual does what he wants. Is that what that is? When you go back into the stories, is that what's happening? I would argue no. What's going on in that time period? You don't see it all the time, but you see it quite often. Intertribal warfare. So in this history of the Judges, you have intertribal warfare. And what happens when you have intertribal warfare? What happens to the federal system? If you have everybody fighting with each other, what do we call that? Civil war. If you have civil war, what happens to the country? It divides. It becomes weak. It becomes weakened. If it becomes weakened, what does it become vulnerable to? Sorry? External forces. So why do they want a king? It's not because, we have the perspective they want a king because they're in rebellion. They want a king because they don't trust God. They want a king because they want they want someone to do the work for them. Why do they want a king? They want a federal system, which is the system that who gave them? Who gave them the federal system in the first place? God. So they want to actually run along the plan that God gave them, which was to have a federal government. And the problem is, it's not working the way God designed. The way God designed that system to be, it's not working. So they want to keep the system that God gave them. It's not a brand new system. So they're going to invent a way, they call it a king. Because the judges, the way the judges work, they're not able to control and foster federalism. It's all breaking down. Are we okay with that version of events, that narrative? Yeah? We could have a perspective that they're all evil in rebellion to God. I'm not arguing with that one. As Betterton did, I want to give a perspective, give it with enthusiasm, so you believe this is the real version. The real version is that God wants a federal system and it's not working, and so they know how a federal system works. You can't do it by persuasion, you're going to do it by what? Force. We'll get a king, and the king will force you all to work together, won't he? Okay? Because he's going to have a standing army. So they have the federal system. So coming back to our story in Deuteronomy, what is God warning them about when he says, "Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God"? Is Canaan one country? It's one landmass, but is it one country? No, it's many nations. When do those nations fight with each other? Yes. What happens when the external foe comes? What did they suddenly do? They said, let's work together because the Israelites are going to destroy us. Because we can't handle the Israelites when we have individual countries. They just pick us off. Yeah? So they try to become a federal system, but it's not enough and it's too late. Too little, too late. They can't really become a federal system that late because they have totally different ways of understanding and working together. Yeah? But they want to try and they fail. So what is God teaching them here? When he says, "Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God." What's he telling them not to do? Warning against? we'll call it tribalism. So the strong tribes are whom? Who are the strong tribes? Simeon? Judah? These, who? Reuben. So these strong tribes, what do they want to do? They want to take control. And how do you take control? According to this context, how will you take control? What's one of the things that you'll do? You'll set up a place of worship in your own locality or in your own country. And you want people to come there and worship there. Then Judah will say, we don't want to do that. We can have our own place of worship. So what would you end up having? 12 places of worship. And he says, we're not going to do it that way because we want to have a singular nation. So you know what happens after Solomon dies? This very thing, isn't it? This very thing, you end up having 2 places of worship, which actually end up being 3 places of worship. You have Jerusalem, which was the established place, and then you have Dan and Bethel. So Dan and Bethel, it's a geographical issue. They're going to get these 10 tribes, singular nation, federal system, but they say, we'll have our own place of worship in opposition to Jerusalem. So there's a lot built into this issue about destroy all of those people and you'll have one place. We're okay with that? The story that we've given. It's a lot more complicated than just saying, oh, God will decide for you. Because it's all about whether we're prepared to come together and work together, surrender some of our rights, or we all want to do what we want. I want to ask you a question. It says in verse verse 1. These are the statutes and judgments which ye shall observe to do in the land which the Lord God of your fathers, which the Lord God of thy fathers giveth to thee. So we've said, when you come to that land, this is how you're supposed to behave. Now I want to ask you, some of these laws that are here, do you think they were just invented now, before they go into Canaan? Do you think they were just invented? They weren't there before? Do we think that all of these laws were just invented?
No.
Sister Fiona? Were they all just invented now? All of these laws? No. So some of these laws were already there. Another question. We've spoken about the United States. Give me 2 states at the beginning. Name 2 states. Or we might call them the colonies. Give me 2. South Carolina? Another one? Anyone? Rhode Island. Rhode Island and South Carolina. They're miles apart. Now, what happens is, some pilgrim from whatever country comes to Europe, comes to the United States, and he lands where? In South Carolina. And he likes the place, he settles down, and what's he going to do? He's going to write to whom? He's going to write to back home. Who will he write to? Strangers or friends and family? And what will he take to them? This is the glorious land. Why don't you do what? Come and join me. When they come and join, where are they going to go to? Rhode Island or South Carolina? South Carolina, aren't they? So all the people from South Carolina, what will end up happening? They'll have tribalism. You go to Rhode Island, and that person's going to say to his friends and relatives, why don't you come to America, the glorious land? What do you end up having? different countries, or what we would call tribalism. We okay with that? So part of Deuteronomy, when you get to the back end, before Moses dies, what does he do before he dies? Done all the blessings and cursings, which is one nation, not tribalism. Then what does he do? Come on, we all know. Last chapters of Deuteronomy. Sorry? He blesses the 12 tribes, and as he blesses them, what does he say? He points out what? Not their rebellion. What does he point out? Not the leader. When he talks about the 12 tribes, what does he point out? He says, Simeon is what? Bad person. Judah is? He points out their different characters. We okay with that? What do we call that? Tribalism. If you're okay? So, Sister Fiona, do each of these tribes have their own different culture? Yes? They're big enough. These tribes, they run into tens of thousands of people, all with their unique way of doing things. We don't want to either see that or admit that, or we're just clueless. So, you have Africa, and some person, I don't know who it was, just got an imaginary line, and they put it across Africa, and they said, this one we'll call Uganda, and this one we'll call Sudan. And the Sudanese weren't happy, and they'll say, what we will do, we'll get our country, we'll draw another imaginary line and call it South Sudan, and you don't call it literally, but North Sudan. Yeah? So you've got these people just drawing these imaginary lines. And what happens after a while? Because I don't know how, if this is the line, someone who lives 1 mile on this side, 1 kilometre, whatever you do, and 1 kilometre on the other side, why they would be so different. Because it would seem to me, if you're here, and this is the line between South Sudan and Uganda, it would seem to me that this person who lives here and this person who lives here would think the same way compared to this person here and this person here. Because this is like, I don't know, 300k, this is 1k. But this person's allegiance is with whom? With him. Or her. Why? Because someone put this imaginary line there. Tribalism. We call it cultural differences. Yeah? So you'd prefer to marry someone who lives here than your next door neighbour, just because someone put an imaginary line there. So what I want us to consider is, what is God dealing with in these verses? I don't want to use the word tribal anymore. I want to use the word nationalism. Like the word nationalism. Did someone say something? Culture. Because everywhere I go, everybody says, you don't understand my culture. Because you're not from there, or here. African culture is different to European culture. I'm sure it is. But I guarantee you the culture of the Simeonites was different to the culture of the Reubenites. They have different culture. But we don't want to believe that. Because we want to live in a make-believe world. Why would they have the same culture when they have the same dynamics? They just live next to each other. And this line doesn't really even exist. And yet, we could put, this one's not that bad, the worst one is the one that comes over here, isn't it? This is the worst one between these people. Ugandans are what, second-rate citizens, aren't they? Not as good as the Kenyans. There's a lot of cultural differences, a lot of tribalism goes on, a a lot of prejudices. And who created all of that? Some imaginary line that someone put on a map. So the issue that we're dealing with today is the same issue that the Israelites dealt with then. There's no difference. God is going to get them with all their cultural differences and say, I don't care. He says, ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God. These nationalistic, tribalistic, cultural differences will not exist in this country when you take over. So, maybe that's new to you. I don't know. Maybe you don't ever see them being that way. Maybe you just think they're just Jews. But when I look at you, you all look the same to me. I can't tell the facial differences between different countries as well as you can. You can probably tell the accent difference. There are many differences that you can see, but I can't see. And it's the same way when you go to Israel, or the Jews, or the Hebrews, however you describe it. They can see the differences between themselves. Because the Reubenites are all going to intermarry in their own tribe. And maybe the Benjamites are small people, and the Simeonites are big, tall people. Maybe some end up being plump, and some tribes are tall and thin. They don't have all these intermarried, interracial things. They're not a unified body in the way we think. So when we're confronted with these issues today, don't think they're unique. There's nothing new under the sun. So when we want to talk about Eden to Eden, and we want to talk about the glorious land, Canaan, to the true glorious land, heaven, the instruction that's given in the book of Deuteronomy is critical and vital for us to understand. Not just the laws themselves, but the whole idea about you need some counsel and training before you enter into this land on how to behave. And what we're too apt to do is to behave like whom? All of these nations. And you might not have idols or altars in your various places of worship, but you're committing the same criminality. It's the same issue. So I want some people to comment. You agree, you disagree, repentance, confession. Do we all kneel down and say we're sorry? What do you want to do? Because I'm saying the issue that we're confronted with now is the same issue that they're confronted with, and God says, it shall not be so, you shall not do so unto the Lord your God. And I'm saying that's exactly what we're doing. We all have our own idols. We all have our own worship system. Why don't we see it? Why don't we see what's going wrong, how evil what we're doing is? Because here, Moses didn't say, I understand, you know, your parents, they're entrenched in their culture, and it's difficult. He didn't say that. He doesn't even care about your parents. He says, obey or die. Doesn't he? Do you think that's reasonable? Do you think he's uncaring? Do you think he's not sympathetic? Do you think he said, we need time to get used to this stuff? No. It's 11 days march from where to where? 11 days march from where to where? It only took 11 days to get to where they needed to go. And he wasn't going to say, oh, don't worry, you can work it out. It takes 30 years to get used to the system. The 40 years was not designed by God to get them used to working in the federal system. They had 11 days to get their act together. Didn't they? And what was designed to do that? What was designed to take these cultural issues and problems and squash them into a singular nation? What was designed to do that work if it only took 11 days? We already had the answer, we've done the answer in our class. We didn't read the verses, but we went to the passage. So we should know by now, if we're following along, what did God use to turn these cultural issues, these 12 tribes, into a singular nation? Because they got 11 days to do it, not 40 years. What did that?
It's only through the disobeying the place of worship to be one.
No.
Law.
Law's good answer. Which law?
Ten Commandments.
Nope.
I think by giving them the symbol to live in Canaan.
You've got 11 days to do what? What do we call it when you have dispensations? You want to get this dispensation, you're in this one. What is this one for? What's its purpose? Sorry? Preparation. You've got 11 days to prepare. Tell me what God is going to use to prepare them to get into Canaan.
The book of Deuteronomy.
Takes 11 days to get from where to where. Which book? Which chapter? We've gone from law to song. Exodus. This is chapter 15. You've got 11 days to become a federalist system. After 40 years, they still haven't worked it out. After 40 years, they still have not worked it out. And we've been doing this for 30 years and we haven't worked it out either. We have only got months, and even that isn't true, because our time period, 19 to 21, is it just, does it look like this? With nothing in between? No. We can already begin to populate it. What's the first steps of populating that line? What's the first thing we can do that we all know? Increase of knowledge. Formalization. When is it too late, my brother? 1, 2, 3 or 4. When is it too late? Just give me a number. When is it too late for us to get our lives all sorted out? Number 3. Anyone else?
Number 4.
Number 4. Anyone else? Who agrees with number 3? One person. Number 1? Too late?
No.
Number 2? If it's too late at number 1, brother, we're done for. Because we're in big trouble. So I don't think it's number 1. Number 2? Number 3? Number 4?
Yes.
Yeah? Brother Robert? Brother Rogers?
3.
Number 3. Sister Snyder? Number 4? Why don't you agree with number 3?
Because when I take it back to the previous dispensation, most of us came at number 3.
Most of us?
Came at number 3.
We came in at number 3. If you didn't accept number 3, if you weren't here in number 3 and you were at that time period, you didn't accept what was going on, can you get to number 4?
No.
Number 4?
After the testament.
We're chasing number 3. Who's the number 4 person? Number 4. Why number 4?
Because I'm number 4, I'm going to see Jado.
Sorry?
I'm going to see Jado at number 4. The end of dispensation.
Say that, see what?
Shut door.
Shut door, okay? Shut door. You carry on speaking. I want to try and find, if I can find a passage. Tell me when you're finished.
Okay. The reason why I say it is number 4 is that in every dispensation we have to pass through those 4 steps. So if we are going to use the principle that if you have not passed the experience of the third, you cannot go to fourth, and then we can also apply it to the first, because you cannot get into 2 without passing the first step. But if you're going to see the logic of Jado at the end of dispensation, then I'm going to mark number 4. That is the end of dispensation. And we go to another experience.
Okay, so hopefully this is right. Shut door. You said shut door? Yes? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
What's this one?
Formalization.
No. Let's let him do it.
Yes.
No. Think the same way I'm thinking. Shut door.
How will I know it?
Because you use Millerite terminology.
Open door.
No.
Now, I don't know what is in your mind.
No, it's not my mind. I'm going to the Millerite history that you took me to. I'm using your mind. What comes before the shut door? Sorry? What is that?
That's midnight cry.
We agree with that? Okay, let me read you something. Those who rejected the first message, because this is what you said, could not be benefited by the second, neither were they benefited by the midnight cry, which was to prepare them to enter with Jesus by faith in the most holy place. Here, if you haven't got your act together, is it too late?
Not yet.
The midnight cry prepared you for that. If you rejected this and your life isn't ready, you can't be prepared for that.
Yeah.
So it's number 3.
And then it will also take it to number 2, because if you haven't passed
In this model, this is the increase of knowledge.
so if you haven't have increase of knowledge, will you go to the third step?
Sure, but I want to make this increase of knowledge look like this though.
So and then the point should be number 1.
Okay, so let me ask you that question. If you're going to do all of that, how much time have you got to sort your life out on this issue of culture? How long have you got? Because we're already in January.
I didn't understand.
This model says you've got 2 years. Do you agree with that? 2 years. So, I'm saying that you need to sort some things out. All of us. The study that we're doing now is the issue of culturalism or nationalism. You agree with that? That's what the study we did with. Now, is nationalism part of the Midnight Cry message? Yes. So you know what culturalism is? And it's right here in the book of Deuteronomy at the very beginning, chapter 12. Because when you go there, all cultural issues must be put away. Do you agree with that? You're not allowed to have any. Yes? So, when do we need to make sure all of our cultural issues are all sorted out? Because they're not sorted out yet. When this dispensation, I'm saying by 2021, it all needs to be finished. Which is 24 months. Just if you do the numbers. Then I said, actually, you've got waymarks in between there. So it's less time. So I said, when do you need to have everything sorted out? 1, 2 or 3. Some people said 4. So other people said number 3. So if we go to number 3, but then you said it won't work like that. If you're going to use that logic, then it's number 1 where it needs to get sorted out. So if it's number 1, then it means today, right now, each of us need to get our cultural issues sorted out. That means when you go back home, you can't operate and say, oh, sorry Dad, or Mum, I'm going to follow you, and maybe in a few years we'll warm up and we'll do it a different way. Who are you going to follow? You're going to follow your parents, or you're going to follow God? When you go back to Kenya, or Uganda, or South Sudan, who do you propose to follow?
God.
Because people say God, but I can guarantee you 90% of the people here will not go and do that when they go home. That's why most of us won't be here when Michael stands up in Daniel chapter 12 verse 1. We won't be part of the number. Because I suspect most of us do really not have an intellectual understanding that we need to first deal with the problem, and then when we're told that we need to deal with it, we don't have the courage and the guts to go and deal with the problem, because you will put your parents before God. They've got 70 days. I don't know when chapter 12 was spoken. If it's right at the beginning, maybe halfway through, you've got a month before everything changes. And he says, when you get into that land, you cannot do what you want. As soon as they set foot in that land, all cultural issues are eradicated. God will not tolerate them. And if you want to follow through with that, it's number 1, if you flunk the test now, you're in serious trouble. By the time we get to this, for certain, by the time we get here, everything will have been settled and finished and completed. Because by the time we get to number 3, we've already done this. Number 3, what point are we there? Coming back to a previous study that we've done. What do we call that waymark, that point in this line, in this context? What was that? Past, good. Present, future. When you get to this point here, what do you know? You know this based upon the past. This past was all the culmination of the midnight cry message, or the shut door. So we will have a clearer understanding of what those issues were, which were basically culturalism, nationalism, racism, and sexism. This is where it all comes to its climax, because this will show us what's about to happen. So that's why I think people are going for number 3. There's going to be an increase of knowledge on this issue. This is months away. And if you want to go and say, well, you can't be benefited by one, we're right here. You don't have any time to go home and start playing around with your family troubles or your family issues about how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. If we're really genuine about this thing, I want us to think about how we really deal with cultural issues. And it always goes down to one issue: how men treat women. And before we start talking too much about the men, it's also about how women will allow themselves to be treated. You know, if the sisters here are really serious about this, that they really want to be members of the kingdom of heaven, they have to see that this is wrong what's going on, and they don't have enough time to move slowly to make changes. We need some radical decisions to be made by everyone. Every one of us needs to make these decisions, wherever you are. Whether you've been a victim of oppression, or whether you've been part of that group who oppress. And we're in an environment now, none of your family are here, your parents aren't here, they don't know what's going on. You've got no external pressure upon you, and you're still failing all of these issues. And it seems to me that many of us actually want to fail. We don't even care about the issues. We just pay it lip service. We think it's a joke. And all we're interested in is what the Catholics are going to do in a few years. We have degenerated our experience into a theological discussion, and it actually is not a living reality. So, as we think about the book of Deuteronomy, and we think about chapter 22 verse 5, and about what men and women wear, maybe we should contemplate not just about what they wear, but how they interact and behave with one another. The issue of 22:5, is it a coincidence that as we trace through where it is in this section of the book, what the issues are about how they're going to enter into Canaan, when we look at chapter 12, this instruction that's being given, that we need to put away our cultural differences and come as unified body. We cannot do our own little worships everywhere, because each of us have our own way of worshipping God. We've got our own little altars everywhere. If you're not sure about that, when you marry, where are you supposed to marry God? Sorry, where are you supposed to marry someone? In the sight of God, is it not? In a place of worship, a sacred place, maybe we'll call it a grove. So, Sudanese are going to marry in one way, Ugandans in another way, Kenyans in another way. The problem in Sudan, they've got, I don't know how many tribes, and they all do it different ways. So each one is worshipping God in which way? In their own way. Isn't that exactly what he says you're not allowed to do? So you might not think that we're worshipping God in these different ways, but we are. We've got our own idol worship system. And I'm not even criticising your traditional or cultural ways of marriage. I'm not even just doing that. Because that's a separate issue about whether it's even Christian, Christ-like to be married in those certain traditionalistic ways. But the fact that we all do it differently shows you that we're falling into this trap. And verse 4 says, "Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God." The insult is to whom? It's to God. You will not do this to God. And that's exactly what we're doing. And the framework of all of this discussion is the relationship between men and women. If we're willing to see that. As my brother said, if we're going to wait for 3, it's too late. We're at number 1. We're not even at the increase of knowledge yet. You're at a school. We're almost halfway through this school, and we still don't seem to be taking this issue seriously. Whether or not we're going to put aside our cultural perspectives of what's right and wrong, which is idolatry like the nations do, or whether we're going to serve God as a single nation. In the framework of this discussion, it's all about Deuteronomy 22 verse 5. Not what people wear, but about their characters. If we're willing to just do this, garments are a symbol of what? Character. So you know there's something to do with character in this whole subject. Let's consider these things as we go through our day. Heavenly Father, we want to bow before you because we know that we're doing wrong. May it be our prayer that we come under conviction in a profound and serious fashion about the issues that we are discussing, the issues that confront this movement. Help us, Father, to examine ourselves, to look at one another, to see what is going wrong in our experience. If we're not willing to understand and read and interpret your word correctly, what hope is there for us? We only have a short time, and every decision we make today impacts our experience tomorrow. We all know that. Father, please be with us here at this school. May we spend some time meditating and contemplating on the study at hand about what it means to be from a certain country, a certain nation, a certain culture, a certain perspective. Help us, Father, to put away all of these things that do hinder us, that drag us down. Father, please bless us at this school, we pray in Jesus' name.